Hello, welcome to my presentation, What I Wish I Had Known When I Started My IBM career. My name is Jacob Anderson. I'm a 2026 IBM champion and an IBM community advocate. This presentation is about how to accelerate your career by increasing your visibility in the IBM community and how to turn that visibility into opportunity. So the question is, why IBM? The community provides support in the sense that there are capable individuals who are veterans, and they're more than happy to help you out. They're happy to answer questions, they're happy to point you in the right direction. And that's a really great thing about the IBMI community that you're not going to find anywhere else. There are people who are happy to invest in your success, and they're happy to see your journey to garnering that success. And it really sets this community apart from others. You're closer to the business in the sense that you're not just going to be a programmer. You're going to be close to the business rules. And what that means is your input is going to be valued when it comes time to write a new program, make an enhancement, or fix a bug. You're not just going to be coding specs. You're going to be expected to understand how the business operates and what impacts any changes might make. The ecosystem is accessible in the sense that I've heard it said that you can't attend a Microsoft conference and meet Bill Gates, but you can attend an IBMI conference and meet Steve Will, meet Tim Rowe, meet Scott Forsty, and any number of other high-level IBM people who are happy to answer questions, provide insight, and point you in the right direction. It's really a special thing about this community. We're going to go over some things today, some 5 key points. First off is some cool ways you can interact with the IBMI community that'll guarantee your success, how to get the most out of your conference experience, how mentorship factors into your success, some tips and tricks involving interviews, and what side projects can do for you. So let's get started. And we'll start with myths versus reality. Here's a common myth. The IBMI community is only for experienced professionals. That's not true, and it's a pitfall that I fell into. I was able to attend my first conference, and my thinking going into it was maybe after a couple years I'll be able to interact with these people. Right now I'm just out of school. All I've got to show is some schoolwork and some maybe basic understanding of RPG. So I didn't go in with a plan to interact with people in the community. Well, that approach was wrong. Newcomers are extremely welcome in the community, and as I said before, there are people who are invested in your success and they're happy to see you on your journey and help you on your journey in gaining that success. Another common myth, networking, not that important. Absolutely untrue. This is a high trust environment, and one of the best ways you can build trust and show that you're a trustworthy person and worth the while to join a company that's running on the IBMI is to get vetted by other high trust people. So the reality is networking is often the differentiator. It's not useless as I thought. Other common myth, conferences, they're just extra hoops. Absolutely not true. Conferences can expose you to a lot of great people, and for me, it was attending a conference that was a differentiator in me landing my first big break. I came to realize a few things. One is that if people like Jim Buck, Simon Hutchinson, and others are not too important to be at a conference, I was not too important to be at that conference. And I realized after having some trouble getting into the industry that I asked myself, do I want to live in a world where the only thing I can do is apply and hope I get the job? Or do I want to live in the world where I can make some extra actions and increase my chances of getting involved and employed at an IBMI shop? So the reality is conferences create opportunity, and you would be sorely mistaken if you don't utilize the conferences to create that opportunity. We're going to start by talking about building your presence for starts. There's approaches that you can take when attending user groups or conferences or interacting with the IBMI community in any way. And I hope to kind of dispel some misconceptions and give you some direction on how you can start leveraging conferences and user groups to increase your visibility and accelerate your career. One of the barriers that I experienced was the cost of the conference. How do I get in? Do I have the money and the time to invest, not knowing if it's actually going to pan out for me? That's a hard place to be in as a newcomer. Obviously, you love the platform, you love the work, but is this time and money investment going to get me anywhere? Well, one way you can offset that is by volunteering to attend a user group or conference. Sometimes it'll offset the cost, sometimes it'll be taken care of completely. And that way you get a way in without having to invest your money. I didn't know starting off that volunteering was something you could do. I didn't understand how you got involved with conferences or user groups. I was approached and asked to volunteer, but not everybody has heard that. So this is kind of a public service announcement to say you can volunteer for user groups and conferences, and they can eliminate some barriers for you. I experienced when I attended my first conference, I don't know anybody. What do I do? How do I start a conversation? Ask questions. Maybe just approach somebody and say, I'm new here, or this is my first conference, but I have experience. Who should I talk to become aligned with what my goals are? And if they don't have an answer, typically they'll have somebody who they can point you to that will have the answer. So asking questions is a great way to start engaging with the community and start integrating and understanding the environment that you're a part of. Showing up more than once is really important because you are not going to get everything you could if you only attend once. Attending multiple times, you start to see familiar faces, you start to hear familiar names, and you get an idea of the actual landscape of the IBMI community, where it's been, where it's going, and how you fit into it. So I highly encourage you to attend user groups and conferences as much as you can to just start getting a lay of the land and get an understanding of what community you're actually a part of. You can also use GitHub and LinkedIn to really give your online persona a big boost. I started thinking that the IBMI community was a community of very prestigious individuals that were part of a group that I was never going to be a part of. It wasn't until someone I really respected was receiving accolades on LinkedIn for getting the El Barca Award. And that's what really changed my mind on everything. And I went from feeling like the IBMI community was an impenetrable thing to realizing that they do celebrate people who are working hard. I actually see somebody I know who's getting celebrated, and I know for a fact that this person was working very hard behind the scenes. And it really changed my perspective on the community. And that's where my quest to start being more active on LinkedIn began. It started with a like on that post, seeing this wonderful person get recognized. And I realized even if I don't feel like I'm part of this community yet, I can definitely show my appreciation by liking and commenting on these LinkedIn posts and just celebrating the community. And I also realized that maybe I'm not a thought leader in the space yet, but maybe my role was to amplify and boost the existing thought leaders. And I'm doing that through interacting on LinkedIn. My suggestion, congratulate people on their accomplishments. Do this actively. I've gotten opportunities simply by virtue of being active on LinkedIn and recognizing people who have worked hard and deserved recognition. And that goes hand in hand with sharing community wins. Another thing you can do is avoid negativity. If you're having a hard time finding a job or you don't like the way something is going at work, LinkedIn is probably not a good place to share that because employers are looking at your social media and they will possibly pass up giving you an opportunity based on the perception that you might be negative. So I would avoid negativity. And if you do have negative comments or posts out there, I would suggest wiping those, starting clean, and just try to be as positive and engaged with the community as possible. And finally, you can use GitHub to demonstrate your passion for the IBMI and all things related. Don't just dump badly formatted code there. Build something really cool and make sure that it's formatted well. Share it with the community. Some people might learn from it. Other people might have tips to help you improve what you've got. And I think those are two really great ways to help grow your career in the IBMI community. Now we're going to talk about how to get the most out of your conference experience. My first conference was a 3-day conference, and my preparation involved printing off resumes, dressing really nice, and desperately handing out resumes with the hope to get a job, because that was my goal, to land a job. Well, after 3 days of very little interaction with the community, assuming I was too new to interact with the community, I went home with very, very little to show for the 3 days I had invested. And it really bothered me. I couldn't quite understand why it didn't go as well as I thought it should have. And I did a lot of reflecting. And I did some talking with ChatGPT, and it came to light that it might not be a great conference goal to set the metric for success to be landing a job. The possibility of getting a job at a conference is there. It does happen. But if you set that as your only goal, there's a high chance of failure, and there's a high chance that you walk away disappointed. So what I did was I began to think about conferences in a different way. And in the meantime, I was offered another conference opportunity at the wonderful MyTech conference in Michigan. Through my school, my teacher reached out and said, anybody who would like to attend, please let me know. And I initially said, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can handle the disappointment, the devastation of going and being rejected again. But I started really thinking about it, and I asked ChatGPT, what are some good reasons to go to a conference? What are some good goals? And it came out with some goals, networking, obviously, to learn. And those didn't really resonate with me, but one suggestion did resonate with me, and that was to make a good impression. That seemed achievable enough that it was a good goal, but it seemed like I was moving in the right enough direction that it seemed worth doing. So it was achievable and worth my time. So I went in with a different perspective, but I was still faced with the problem. How do I interact with the community? Previously, I had seen the speaker bios for the previous conference that I went to, and I briefly read through them, didn't really think too much about internalizing the information. This time, I decided I was going to put some more effort into learning about the speakers there. This would give me an avenue to talk to at least a few people there. So I studied the people. I created a packet of information of all the speakers, printed a picture, and then their biography. So if I did see them at the conference, I would be able to open my folio, read a little bit about them to refresh my memory, and then go start a conversation with them. If it's Simon Hutchinson, RPG, and SQL, if it's Mike Pavlak, I could talk to him about PHP. And so I changed my approach to the conference. When it came time to tell my teacher that I would still like to attend, it had turned out that I'd missed the deadline and that I would not be able to attend. But because somebody who had already paid for the conference had tragically passed away, I was informed that I could go in their place. And this just goes to show how much had to go exactly right for me to be standing here in front of you today. So we drove out to the conference. Our teacher drove us out there, and we were checking into the hotel the night before. Unexpectedly, all of these people that I had been reading about and studying came through the hotel doors. There was Jim Buck, there was Marina Schwenk, there was Simon Hutchinson, Mike Pavlak, all these really incredible people that I had only read about. And I looked over and I said, "You're Simon Hutchinson, rpgpgm.com." We proceeded to then go to a restaurant from there, and Simon graciously spent much of the night talking to me, talking with me, and explaining the community to me, talking about RPG, talking about SQL, and asking me questions about where I was at. And it was a really, really great experience. The next day at the conference, I attended all these great sessions. I was able to interact with all these people that I had studied, that I had the folio for. And towards the end of the conference, he walked across the conference in front of all the vendors, everybody, to shake my hand and say that he would like to stay in contact. It was a moment that changed my life forever. And it felt like in that moment, I understood what conferences were for. And at the same time, it shattered all of those myths that I had mentioned earlier, that networking wasn't that important. It shattered the myth that conferences were just extra hoops and that the community is just for seasoned professionals. In that one moment, all of those myths were totally dispelled. So fast forward a few months from there, Simon had agreed to mentor me. And I got an opportunity to interview at a company that was doing RPG and PHP. And during the course of the interview, previously I had been told by a company that I didn't land the job with that they were willing to train me. And I thought, what do you mean train me? I just got done with school. There shouldn't be any training. Well, that's a bad approach. Every company has their own proprietary way of doing things. There's always more to learn. So if a company says they're going to train you, that's a good thing. To illustrate the fact that I was willing to learn more and knew that I had to learn more, I mentioned during the interview, I do have a mentor. And I didn't want to name drop because I didn't want to, I guess, flex too hard, so to say. And they asked me who my mentor was. And I said, Simon Hutchinson. I went to it and they said, wait, you know Simon Hutchinson? And I said, yes, he's mentoring me. And two of the interviews looked at each other in such a way to kind of imply this guy's got the job. And that really sealed the deal. All of those myths that I went over before had vanished. I was completely wrong about the community, and nothing about the conferences changed. What changed was my perspective. So I'm here to advocate that conferences are really great opportunities, and I encourage you to make the most out of them. And I hope that you can walk away getting out of my second conference what I wish I would have gotten out of my first conference. And that's a mindset thing. Going back to setting conference goals, here are some good goals to set, ones that are achievable and won't leave you walking away feeling like you had wasted an opportunity. Learn new skills. This is a really great one. There's tons of learning to be had. There's tons of people who have done the hard work, done the legwork, so you can learn in an easy way. You can go back to your shop and you can start implementing these really cool new tools to increase productivity, to make your job easier, and to overall benefit the company. Meeting new people in the community is really important, as I illustrated before. As I said, this is a high trust environment that we're working in. And one of the best ways to become a high trust person is to interact with other high trust people and have them vouch for you. Understanding the ecosystem is really important. You need to know where we've been, where we're going, and where we are right now. And you're going to get a feel for that from talking to people, from attending the sessions, and from communicating with vendors. So I think it's a great opportunity at a conference to start understanding the ecosystem. And finally, some people are just inspirational. I can think of a couple off the top of my head that I don't want to name drop, but I've gone in groggy, kind of unenergetic to a session, and just the energy that the person brought to the session made me excited for the whole rest of the day. And so that's really important too. It's important to have people to look up to and to have a direction that you want to go and to find those people that inspire you and motivate you. When it comes to engaging effectively at the conference, talk to everybody, talk to anybody. And I have a couple what I like to call slam dunk questions that you can ask anybody. How long have you been on the platform? Where do you work and what do you do? The best one I've found is, how did you get started on the IBM I? Because everybody's got a different story and everybody's story is interesting. So I think that's a good starting point. How did you get involved with the IBM I? It's almost always going to lead to a really great conversation, and it's a gateway to learning more about people. The vendors are doing a great service by sponsoring these wonderful events. And it's great to go thank them for what their contributions are, but also you can learn a lot as well. You can find out who's hiring, you can find out what the new things that they're working on are, and you can make new connections. And I found that the vendors are some of the most approachable, nice people you could possibly meet. If you do manage to meet somebody at an event, I encourage you to follow up after the event. Don't let it be a, I'll see you next year at the same conference sort of thing. You want to make these connections, keep these connections, and occasionally check in on these people. Get their number, get their LinkedIn, and continue that communication, because as we all know, networking and people are very important when it comes to your career growth and your trajectory in the community. Now we're going to talk about mentors and how that can help you and what it means for your presence in the community. As I illustrated before, and might not have even known at the time I had the interview, that being mentored by somebody carries weight, as evidenced by the basic automatic hire I got just by virtue of who I was being mentored by. This isn't the only reason to do it. The real reason you're doing it is so you can get a perspective, so you can get one-on-one time with somebody respected in the community, and you can continue to grow. But it also does carry weight. These people have a lot to offer, and being mentored by these people can only help you. You don't know what you don't know. And Mentors are going to help you smooth out areas where you're rough. They're going to point you in directions that you hadn't considered, and they're going to give you ideas and resources that you might not have considered. You're going to find that if you give your mentor a little bit of information, they're going to be able to accelerate your learning quite a bit. They're going to know the resources that you don't know to look for, and they're going to be able to connect you with people who can help you accelerate your learning where they might not be able to, or someone who is better able to accelerate your learning. When I first started, I didn't really have much of a career perspective. I knew I wanted to do RPG, but there's so many different things, so many different roles you can have on the IBMI. And a mentor is going to help you whittle that down and find out what you really want to be doing. For instance, for me, I really like the role of a programmer analyst. I like analyzing the whole system, working with the code, working with the database, and delivering solutions. So that came from being mentored. I might not have ever realized this without some help from my mentor. And finally, skill gaps. We've all got them, but we all don't necessarily know that they're there. A mentor is going to help you smooth that out and once again point you in the right direction so you know where to go to kind of eliminate that gap. How do you find a mentor? Well, there are avenues to finding a mentor. Common is a great avenue to do that. But if you do have somebody in mind, make sure that you're approaching them respectfully, respecting their time, and letting them set the pace. I don't, you're going to want to get to know them a little bit before you just come out and ask them if they will be your mentor. So that's my suggestion for you. Don't ask for a job opportunity and never talk to your mentor again. You want advice, you want insight, you want to leverage their years of experience so you can position yourself in the community. Ask for advice, not favors. If you have things that you're curious about, which hopefully you do, because there is a lot to learn, make sure that you have those on deck when you do approach your prospective mentor. You want to have something to say, you want to have questions you want answered, and you want to have a sort of direction so they know how they can best help you. Don't leave your mentors on red if they've emailed you or texted you or however they're communicating with you. Make sure that you're following up quickly, concisely, and politely. These people are typically very important people with a lot of things to do. So the fact that they're taking time out of their day to contact you and stay in contact with you, it is a good idea to show that same respect back, respect their time, and make sure you're on the ball with replying back. Don't leave them on red. Don't never answer again. Just be courteous in that way. We're going to talk a little bit about some tips and tricks with the interview and what you can do to make the most out of the interview process. A lot of companies are going to ask you what you know about the company when you get to the interview. You don't want to have an ambiguous answer. Typically, there is an About Us page for companies, and they're more than happy for you to recite some of the things that you read on the About Us page. I would suggest having 3. If you can nail down 3, that's great. The more interesting they are to you, the more likely you are to remember them. Understanding the technologies they use is huge. For instance, you might be interviewing for an RPG role, but if the company has some kind of web portal, it might not be a bad idea to ask them if you're going to be interacting with the web portal and how that relates to their business. Try and learn as much as you can. Show that you're oriented, show that you care, show that you've done your research. That's what this step is going to help you with. You're going to want to know what technologies the role is requesting of you, and you're going to want to be honest about what your capabilities are. Maybe it calls for a lot of things and you have most of them, but maybe it calls for JavaScript and that's not something you have a lot of experience with. Telling them that you know you can grow in the JavaScript realm, but being able to express that you're skilled in everything else is going to give them a perspective on you. And it's realistic. That helps them prepare and understand where you're coming from. And it makes sure that you're being honest about your capabilities. And you don't want to get hired saying you know something only for them to find out after you're hired that you're going to need some work on it. It's okay to not know everything. It's very rare that your skill set aligns one to one with what they're requesting, and that's okay. And knowing that you can be honest with the company sets up the relationship for good communication in the future. Don't start lying, don't oversell yourself, but don't undersell yourself either. Just be honest and make sure you're aligned for what they're asking of you. Finally, be ready to explain your learning style. For me, I learn by doing. I read something, I have a rough idea of what I'm trying to accomplish, but it doesn't all come together until I build something and integrate all the ideas into something. So everybody has a different learning style. Be ready to explain what your learning style is to the people who are interviewing you. Great questions to ask. This one I read on Reddit early in my career, had a lot of experience with writing new code, did not really have any insight as to how bug fixes and enhancements went through the pipeline. And so it was suggested on Reddit to ask this question during the interview. And I think this shows that you're oriented in a way that other people who are brand new, at least, and even if you're not new, this is a great question, but this sets you apart. It shows that you understand what world you're a part of and how things work beyond just the code. So I think it's a great question to ask. How does work flow from ticket to completion? Similar question, how are bugs and enhancements handled? Every company has a different flow. I worked at companies with proprietary ticketing, internally written systems. Other companies are using Jira. It's good to ask this question because it shows you're oriented and it gives you some time to prepare if they do want to move forward with the role. Finally, what does success look like for me in this role? This is really important. You want to insert yourself into the question when you can. This helps the interviewers envision you in the role. It makes it sound like you're already able to perform the role. And it beats just saying, what does success look like in this role? You're inserting yourself in, you're letting the interviewer envision you in the role, which is going to help you. If they can see you in the role, if they can see you doing the work, they're going to feel that much better about hiring you. Closing the interview, I think a great question to ask is, will there be senior developers or experienced developers who are going to help me ramp up and become effective? This is probably the plan from the company anyway, but framing it as something that you're looking for shows that you're already aligned with what they want. That means you're going to be an easy person to onboard. I think this is a really great question, and they should probably have somebody who's able to show you how things work and what the job requires. So great question on multiple fronts. When you're closing the interview, I think a great question to ask is there anything about my background or qualifications that makes you think I'm not a good fit for this role? I was required to ask this in one of my roles prior to getting into tech. And I think this is a great question because They either have to say, no, we don't think there's anything about your background or skills that makes you not a good fit for this role, which means they're admitting you are a good fit for the role. Or if they do say something like, well, we were hoping for somebody with SQL experience, it gives you an opportunity to set the record straight and say, oh, I actually do have SQL experience. I didn't know the role would require it, but I do have that experience. So you can kind of reframe things. They might have walked away thinking that you didn't have a really important skill, when in reality, by asking this simple question, you're able to clarify that. Once again, showing interest in growth is huge. Not everybody knows everything. People, companies want people who are going to want to grow, who are learning and like to learn. If you can express that interest in growth, you're going to seem like a much better candidate than somebody who maybe thinks they already know it all. So I would express in some ways an interest to grow. And if there's something you don't have experience in, that's a great opportunity to say, this is something that I'm really looking to learn more about. So this sounds like a good fit for me. Asking about next steps is great for you. You can typically get a feel on how interested they are in moving forward with you. And if they give you a time frame, that helps ease your mind in the meantime. If they say, you should hear back from us in 2 weeks, if you don't ask that question, you don't know when you're supposed to be hearing back. So you don't know if you should be worried or not. If they say 2 weeks, you can put your mind at ease until 2 weeks comes, instead of worrying the whole time and being confused as to what is going on in the background and where you're at in their process. Finally, we're going to talk about using side projects to really help give you a big boost. One thing side projects do is keeps you sharp. And I think when you get into a new role, you want to come in hot. You want to be able to speak openly and honestly and on the spot about what you're doing. And when you have that kind of recent experience consistently working on something, you're going to find that the questions are easier to answer. So if they hit you with something like, what does set lower limit do? Even if that's something you're uncomfortable with, you can at least say, well, most recently I've been working on a side project where I'm getting data using SQL. So I know that set lower limit has to do with positioning to a point in a file, but I'm not super familiar with it, but I've been using SQL. It gives you something to fall back on. I might not know exactly the answer to your question, but here's what I do know. You'll be able to speak more confidently because you're working on these types of things. As I mentioned before, you can lean on that most recent project, something you can speak confidently about because you've recently worked on it. Whereas if they ask you about something that's a little distant and you haven't been working on this stuff, you might just say, I don't know, I don't remember, I haven't done this since school. Those are not good answers. So you want to have this side project to keep you sharp, to keep you interested, and to demonstrate initiative. You aren't required to have a side project, but it will really, really help your case. It shows that you're interested in the craft outside of work. And to me, I use the analogy of a doctor. If I have a doctor that clocks out at 5 p.m. after his shift and he doesn't care about the craft after he's done working, compared to a doctor who's trying to find the best and newest ways to master his craft, I want that second doctor who's taken the extra time out of his day, who really loves what he's doing, operating on me. And I think the same goes for programming. I think you want somebody who's looking to grow and always become better. And so if you can demonstrate that you're that type of person through side projects, I think that's a really great idea. And finally, it shows that you've got an interest in the platform. This isn't just a job for you. This is an identity. And I think the sooner you accept that your identity is an IBMer, the better it's going to work out for you. We don't want people who are only care about the IBMI from 9 to 5. We want people who are zealots for the system and people who really love what they're doing. And side projects are a great way to demonstrate that. So let's talk about a practical path that you can follow to help you on your way to accelerate your career by increasing that visibility and turn that visibility into opportunity. Attend a user group or conference. You're already here, so you're already doing well. Attending a conference, that's great. And I hope you can make the promise to me that you're going to take at least one of these actions to improve your opportunities. Second, reach out to a potential mentor. If you don't know where to start asking around. There are plenty of people who are more than happy to help you on your way. If all else fails, go to Common. They have a website, which I'll link in this presentation so you can download it. You'll have the link right to the mentor form to sign up to be mentored by somebody. So please, I encourage you to reach out to a potential mentor. Start a small side project, and my suggestion would be whatever part of tech that you're interested in, I would do something that you enjoy doing and try and branch that into some lesser known areas. For me, I like SQL, so I try to keep my side projects very SQL focused because that's just what I enjoy doing. I enjoy working with the data, and it has a lot of applications. SQL is always a strong language to be good with, has multiple applications, and it's used almost everywhere. And finally, stay curious and engaged. Ask questions, follow up with people, make those connections, make the best out of your user group and conference opportunities, and you're going to find that you're going to be growing and excelling in this community. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending my presentation today. Are there any questions? Well, thank you very much. So we have a little bit of a a poll here, and if you would be so kind as to scan the QR code, let me know what I did well and submit that. That would be really, really helpful. Let me know what I did well. Let me know what I could improve on, what you liked, what you didn't like, and if you feel that this presentation helped you and what I could do better. And with that, I just want to say thank you again so much, and I hope that you make the most out of this conference with all this new information. Thank you very much.